Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and I got a couple delicious things that we're going to be feeding to a couple of my worm bins. These are both cucumbers. The one on the top doesn't look too good, does it? That one's been out in the fridge for quite some time. The other one actually grew here in my garden, but it kind of froze. It was kept in a part of the refrigerator that does have the tendency to freeze things, even though it's not the freezer. So I guess my fridge probably needs a little maintenance. The bins that we're going to be checking in on are the original red wigglers. I resisted the urge to check in on these yesterday. They were 70 days old yesterday, and their next feeding is number 7. So yesterday seemed like the nice round number of 10 weeks to check in on them, but I didn't get around to it. But today we're finally checking in on them. It's been 12 days since they were last fed, and the stuff they got last time seemed like it would go quick. So I think we're not going to see many leftovers. Let's get into the bins and see. I was trying to decide on those cucumbers. Do we put them in whole? Do we cut them up? Or we attempt to cut them up? They are frozen, so cutting them could be a little bit tricky. Definitely be easier just to plop them in whole as they are. Might actually make for a little bit more of an interesting check-in later if it takes them a little work to get into it, to breach the skin. I've got a replacement newspaper. I was thinking maybe we would actually use some of this old newspaper down in the feeding areas to be supplemental bedding. I mean, I've got some napkins that I need to do away with, some soiled napkins that are going to go in as bedding today. But this paper, it's been in here for some time, would also be a welcome little something that the worms would probably like nibbling on if it was covered in cucumber juices. Not sure what the feeding from last time is going to look like, if there's anything. In a way, I just somehow sense that we're not going to see anything. I looked at what we gave them last time. There were stuff like bits of cucumber, I think, and maybe tomato. And I mean, 12 days later, I could seeing some of the bedding that we put in here as leftovers, which is what I think we're seeing, little chunks of here and there. But as far as food remains from that last feeding, seems very, very unlikely. So, oh, well, corn cob does not go back to the previous feeding. It goes back to a feeding prior to that. So I looked at the video briefly of the last check-in, and at that time already that stuff was showing up as leftovers. I just can't remember if there was another one. I know there was one in both bins. Whether there was more than one in both bins, I can't recall for sure. Let's see. Let's check this one out here. For some reason, I always go to bin number 1 first. I mean, bin number 2. From your point of view, it's 1 and 2. The way I have them numbered, as you saw them numbered on the little intro that I created there. That looked to me like maybe tomato skin or something. Even this. This is so interesting. Long, thin, pretty see-through strips. And that might have been skin of the cucumber. Usually the stuff they're getting is just the skin of cucumbers, but in this case, I guess the really weird looking colorful one just went bad, and then the other one regrettably was one grown here in the garden, should have been eaten, but it's turning into worm food. This to me looks like the stem of a banana. I'm not sure if that was from last feeding. Just based on the look of it, it looks like it probably goes back further than just 12 days. All right, I guess once we've fed these little guys and we cover up the feeding area, we can explore the outer reaches of the two systems to see how things look. Hopefully they're doing just as good as they are in the middle. We've only seen the middle so far. Let's start piling in the leftovers we found so far. Those coffee filters that we saw spread out in the beginning that I took off, those were just indicating to us where we last fed, and I usually use coffee filters that way as just feeding zone indicators. I don't have replacements today, so they're just going to get those old ones back. Luckily, those are still holding up and they're in great shape. I could certainly continue to use them as is. So I think I've decided we're going to go whole, because then maybe we'll even start bumping into similar skins like we saw from the previous application of cucumber. But now we'll probably, if there is any of it left over, if we come back in time, it'll be big pieces. This one's a little bit curved. Hopefully we can fit it in there as gracefully as we got the straight one in there. And that was pretty simple. I guess the only thing remaining is some of this paper that I also planned on including as bedding to go with the feeding. I'm just thinking about how juicy that cucumber is and how its juices would definitely benefit this dry paper going in here. Maybe it too should be beneath the juicy cucumber, so that as the cucumber begins to spew its juices, and since it was, frozen, I don't know, every time I have frozen cucumbers going into systems, sometimes if I've still even got them on the bench here and not yet entered into the system, I already start to see how this stuff starts to just expel its moisture content super quick as it thaws. So I have a hunch that that's what's going to happen with these pretty soon too. Although there again, with the skin intact, unless there's little breaks in it somewhere, perhaps that moisture will just stay inside, creating a really tempting thing for the worms to try to breach and get access to. So it doesn't seem like much, but as I keep looking at it, it does actually seem like a pretty nice feeding. And who knows, maybe if we come back in another 12 days, we'll see a crazy mob scene of worms attacking the cucumbers. Although I got a feeling, just, with cucumber being mainly moisture, I don't think they're going to take very long in terms of doing away with that. Yeah, kind of like we made a hint to earlier, why don't we take a quick peek, see how things in the outskirts of the bins are doing before we cover up and put away. I was trying to decide if the plastic coverings should continue to remain on these systems, because all the other systems that I have that are older than these have already had their plastic coverings replaced. In some cases just with like a sheet of newspaper, maybe with some cardboard on top. It really depends on how damp things in each system were. And here I was sort of questioning whether we might want to follow suit and swap out the plastic bubble wrap covering for something that permits a little bit more airflow, a little bit more ventilation. Luckily the bubble wrap by its nature does also allow a little bit of airflow beneath itself, not sort of like sometimes I use plastic bags. Those don't allow any airflow. But the bubble wrap seems to be doing a really nice job. So the one thing we will be replacing is that top covering newspaper that we upgraded to becoming worm food sort of bedding in the feeding area. So I've got some newspaper we can spread out here underneath the bubble wrap. That's just another thing I like to do sometimes. I suppose the bubble wrap could just go straight in, right on top. But, it seems to me like a cool thing to have, like a little landing pad for whatever moisture might recirculate on that top covering plastic. And to me, it usually just seems like a simple top covering sheet of paper of some sort is the easiest way to get that going a little bit. So weird. I was almost certain that was plastic, but I'm fairly sure at this point that that's got to be the skin of cucumber. Pretty cool to catch it at that stage of decomposition. We just sort of got it here in the nick of time to see it that way, because I'm sure, based on the way that stuff felt, it would be gone in no time. So I've got some newspaper here. I don't think we need much. It seems like I could probably just tear one of these pieces in half, and then each system would get one. I guess on the length it's a little bit overboard, but we can account for that with a quick little fold on each end. And then back can come the plastic covering. But we forgot the feeding zone indicators. Let's not forget to get those back in place too. Those always rest right on the top surface of the material of the bin. I think that's going to be a nice spot. And right there too, you got a little bit more kind of paper type materials that the worms could be nibbling on if they felt like they needed to, but you never see any wear. Maybe because the system is still young enough and so thoroughly filled with residual bedding from when it was originally launched that maybe they're just not really in the need for any other bedding type materials. Let's make this into bedding too. since it was kind of torn. Perhaps that too can get nibbled on. All right, everyone. Well, the only thing remaining here is to put back the coverings, and once again, I've got my my other supplies over there on the side out of view a little bit, so I sometimes forget that I might want to add some other stuff. I'm going to use that as a past tense. I had my worm chow on the ready, thinking that we might be able to include it. And this might be an interesting test if we don't forget to check in on it. What if, as this stuff gets moist, if there was just a little bit more motivation for the worms to work the material down, why don't we put a little sort of weird pattern, like a diagonal stripe or something, with some worm chow to see if it does trigger a little bit of worm activity out on the top covering paper. And if it does, then I would assume that that section that's got the worm chow in it will possibly get nibbled through. So I'll be curious to see if that's what happens in here. I wonder if we'll be able to even see it through the bubble wrap as we come back in here the next time. That would be kind of cool if we would pull these out onto the bench, turn on the lights, and see a couple strips over there where the paper had been nibbled away. All right, everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you did enjoy it, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.